So without further ado, I'd like to introduce JoJo. She's from Tyendinaga, and she's been doing work around advocacy and rescuing around human trafficking for a number of years. Also advocacy in the area of child welfare, working out of Ottawa and Cornwall. So we're very lucky to have her. She travels all over the Turtle Island, giving this information to both youth and parents and families. And so we find it's really important. And you know, as Isabel might be able to share too, like some people in Kanyen'keha think it's not happening here, we're safe here, it doesn't really happen here. And I think that's probably a bit of a naive perspective to take, because there are situations, of course confidential, but there are situations where the peacekeepers are involved. JoJo has been involved, and so it is happening here. And so we do need to take this quite seriously. And so without going into it, I'll ask JoJo to step in, and it's kind of an open, I think it's more of an open dialogue too, so if there's questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and if something sparks you and you want to ask something or you want more information on that, it's a small enough crew that we can be flexible around that, so thanks.
Thanks everyone. So I am JoJo, that's my GST name, and like she said, I'm from Tyendinaga. Tonight will be a little bit more in depth, and please do ask questions if you want to. So there'll be a PowerPoint, and there's a couple of videos that we're going to show that are coming up. And I'm also child welfare during the day. I'm the Truth and Reconciliation worker for the OACAS of Ontario with the Children's Aid Societies. But at night, through OACAS, I'm the anti-trafficking liaison worker for OACAS, and I also have my own investigation team that's gone across the world to get some of our kids back home. But I'm also really, really excited to say that I have been certified by ARC, the Recovery of Children from the United States. And what that is, and the difference is that in the States, they have NGOs, and what NGOs compared to being in Canada, it's just community partners coming together to collectively unify a group of people that can do the recovery of children if something happens in their community. So that's what we're trying to promote here in Canada, that some of the communities will come together and to do that. So tonight, I've been to Kanyen'keha, this is my third time, so I called it the H2O. It was called You Can't Handle the Truth, but now it's called In Plain Sight. So the presentation explores a long-standing and overlooked reality of sex and human trafficking in Indigenous communities. For centuries, our communities have been endured exploitation, while bordering societies has remained silent, seeing it, hearing it, and feeling its presence, but saying nothing. Sex and human trafficking impacts Indigenous peoples in unique and deeply rooted ways, while the global conversation around trafficking has gained momentarily only in the past 5 years. In the past 5 years, human trafficking has gained a $170 billion industry. My youngest survivor is 2 and 5 years old, because they're getting younger and younger as the years go on. This crisis has been ongoing in Indigenous communities for generations. What now label as a new way of human trafficking is the truth and continuation of historical injustices. So I want to take you through a journey of history and Indigenous knowledge and live through truths. Together we're going to uncover the realities that's been hidden in plain sight. So I go back in a little bit of a history and turn the pages, and even when I think about the full circle, but it takes a lot of trust to hear about the reconciliation and the truth of reconciliation. So, when we think of reconciliation, we pause in ourselves, and what does that truly mean? It's a word that we hear often but don't understand in depth. Reconciliation suggests that conciliation exists at some point. But we have to ask ourselves, when did conciliation actually happen in Canada? It hasn't happened yet. The last time any of the conciliation happened is when the treaties were signed. So the main body in the real conciliation looks like it means honoring the treaties, but respecting them, not just in words but in action. Because if we don't understand our history, we can't understand the challenges that we face today, like the issues of human trafficking and exploitation. And they didn't start just yesterday. So I do have a game, and I played it this afternoon with the young people. I know that a lot of people that were there this afternoon are here today, so you better know the answers. But I'm going to go through the dates just to bring you up to par. So it's rooted back in the 1600s. Let me remind you that over the years, we've had more than thousands of recommendations to how to build a better relationship between Canada and the Indigenous peoples. I have to remind you that in the 1970s, in 1996, 2015, and 2017, there was over 1,000 recommendations to the Canadian government to how to build a better relationship with Indigenous communities and Canada. But over in the last, since the 1970s, there's been 1,000 of them, and only 18 of them have been actually done. So a lot of people feel that we're being forgotten, and that the recommendations are being pushed to the side. And now we've heard on the news that next year, in 2026, they're going to take half of the stories that our elders shared at the reconciliation time and try to bury them and get rid of them. And there's a lot of people in Parliament right now trying to fight that doesn't happen, because my grandchildren need to understand the truth of Canada, and if we bury them again, it's just going to repeat history. So like this afternoon with the kids, I went through the history, because if we don't know our history and why things happen in some of our Indigenous communities, we don't understand how we're going to relate them to the future. So I'm going to say the answers to the questions, and I have two little gifts, but we'll just try to give them away before anybody goes home. So in 1497, that's when the Europeans began to come to Canada, and the John Cabot happened. And then in 1963, Pocahontas was captured, and this is the first documentation of human trafficking in Canada's history. And then in 1763, when the Royal Proclamation came in, then in 1828, the first residential school was established in Brantford, Ontario, which was called the Mushlow. And then in 1867, when the Indian Act came into play, the 1870s, when the Indian agents were formally established, in 1876, when the Enfranchisement Act came into play, 1885, Northern and Western Revelation came into Métis Nation, and then 1930, which I think is really interesting, that in 1930, the Demoir Indian Hospital opened, and the sterilization of Indigenous women, claiming Indigenous women were mentally unfit, and they stopped. And this stopped, it started in 1930, and it just stopped last April. Like that's astronomical that it just stopped last year, and this came in the 1930s. In 1953, when the Inuit were relocated, and in the 1960s, the 60 Scoops happened, and then 1996, when the Royal Proclamation, the Royal Commission of Aboriginal Peoples came in. Then again, as everybody knows, in 2008, when the formal apologies from Mr. Harper, the 215, the TRC of Canada came in, the 219, the MMIP, the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, the National Inquiry came in, and then COVID in 2020, and then 2022 when restrictions stopped. People ask me all the time, why do you talk about COVID? So the city of Ottawa, when we had COVID that happened and hit the city, when it was locked down, all of the human trafficking went underground. And we could literally sit down, we call where I live in Vanier and Overbrook the Little Res, and we could literally sit on Montreal Road when everything was locked down and watch the traffickers come and pick up people right from their home, right on Montreal Road, on the 20th and the 1st of the month. And people thought it was just like Ubers and food, but it wasn't, and we had to really scoop into what was going on. And then when 2022 came along and the doors opened up in the first summer, that's when human trafficking exploded in the city of Ottawa, because everybody was out and about, they left their homes, and then trafficking exploded. So keep in mind, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the TRC. And in 2023 and 2024, none of the TRC recommendations were completed, and none of the MMIP movement was completed. And out of all those thousands, like I said, the 1,000 recommendations that we did with Canada, only 18 have been done since 1970. But human trafficking and sex trafficking, like I said, profits $170 billion a year. People think that human trafficking and sex trafficking just happened in the last 5 years, but as history shows, it's been going on with Indigenous communities for decades. So In our communities, our young boys and girls, like I said, my youngest survivor is 2 and 5 years old, and our boys are becoming hot commodities. And I've been doing a lot of teachings with the sports guys in lacrosse and in basketball when they're in the motels and they're traveling with their teens. A lot of people are getting picked on and groomed inside the motels, so I've been teaching a lot of the sports event guys because they don't think it happens to the guys, and the guys are actually the hottest commodity, especially if a young man. And I do have a picture that I usually bring around with me. I know it's an artist picture, but I use this picture because I can't tell if that's a man or a woman in that picture. And they're like, what does that mean? Well, in the sex trafficking world, when an Indigenous guy is growing their hair long, the groomers can have them as a boy or a girl, which costs them more money. So right now, in the States, an Indigenous guy that has long hair that can look like a girl or a boy is between $5,000 and $7,000 American dollars to be used, because they can look like either or, and that's double the money for a groomer. So, like I said, it profits $170 billion. It's been flourishing since the last 5 years. And the largest portion of our community is based on the Indigenous people and high sense of profit motivation to traffickers. And our people, the Indigenous people, are the hottest commodity. There's a short clip I'm going to show you. It's called the 401 Corridor, the Dark Highway. It's going to come out right now, Prime and Netflix for fighting. They have been fighting for this movie for the last year. Short little story. I was asked by the Parliament dignitaries of the coalition in Ottawa to come to Parliament to recap this movie before it was premiered to everybody, because it was supposed to be out last year on Human Trafficking Week, and it hasn't made it out yet. On Parliament, 15 minutes before the address was given, you were supposed to go to Spark Street in Ottawa and wait to find out where you were supposed to be 15 minutes before the premiere of the show, because that's how locked down it was. So there's a whole bunch of people sitting on Spark Street in Ottawa. We get a text because you had to do so much paperwork to get invited to this movie premiere. You get 15 minutes, you get into Parliament, and then the movie premiere is there. So the movie premiered is going to be this one right here, and it should be coming out, and it's called The Dark Highway.
Did you agree to do this with me?
My responsibility is to tell the story of what's currently happening to young people.
If you drive the 401, you are more than likely passing somebody that's driving it unwillingly, that's being moved from jurisdiction to jurisdiction against their will. Because human trafficking happens here.
I was 16 when I met him, 17 when I entered the industry.
I was 12. And I still think about it sometimes because I know that he's still alive.
Your child can be lured and groomed of no fault of their own. It is happening.
There's girls that are getting locked up. They're being held against their will. We're being branded like freaking cattle, moved around like cattle from city to city.
There seems to be a huge market for this, and it actually seems to be younger and younger that these men are wanting.
He would pick up the girls at the school, take them to the Toronto hotels on the 401.
Every hotel or motel that you see along the 401 corridor, there is human trafficking happening there, and they don't care.
It's one of the things that deserves the label of true evil.
Who do you think is responsible for the crime of human trafficking?
Well, that's a really good question.
Stop buying our kids. We're not going to be quiet.
Nations right down to here. There's families that have enjoyed picnics. Has anyone drove the 401 from here to there? Okay. One of the biggest things in Tyendinaga to do is go to the Big Apple. Does everybody know where the Big Apple is? So when this movie comes out, there's a lot of families that have enjoyed picnics and time with their families, have spent times in motels, have played hockey in Belleville, played hockey in Kingston. When the movie comes out, they're going to be floored at places that they have enjoyed their time with their families, where trafficking is happening at large commodities. And I said, do you realize that, like in small towns like Coburn, Peterborough, people don't think it's happening here. When this movie premieres, they're gonna be shocked. And I said, there's gonna be supports needed in those small towns, because when they premiere this movie, things that they've been going to for years is gonna be astronomical to their mind, that I've spent time with my family there. All the beaches from Tyendinaga in Wellington, the sandbanks. Does everybody know where the sandbanks are? The sandbanks is on there. People spend big bucks to go and have bed and breakfasts at the sandbanks. Well, now they have a do's and don'ts. When the movie premieres, there's places like the sandbanks on there. It's going to shock people, because a lot of people, as we've said this afternoon and today, they don't think it's happening in their towns. And when I bring up COVID in the little game that we play, when COVID hit, everybody from Toronto came our way to Kingston and Tyendinaga because of the beaches. There was nothing else to do but go to the beach. And at the beaches, they had little markers where you can have your family. I could be here, one family could be there. We always kept our distance. And then trafficking was astronomically large after the Toronto crew came into our, up to Tyendinaga and had all the beaches. So that's why I bring COVID into that little game, because COVID upped the ante for human trafficking once everything was opened. So understanding human trafficking as a person refers to recruitment, transportation, transferring, harboring, and receiving of individuals through the means of force, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, the abuse of power for the purpose of exploitation. Human trafficking occurs when a predator, often referred as a trafficker, takes action and employs the means of forced friction for the purpose of compelling a victim to provide commercial sex, labor, or services. Now, organ trafficking is just come into play twice down in the Toronto area. But labor trafficking just had a big bust in the Quinte area, because we have all the wineries that are down in the county of Picton, Ontario, if anybody knows where Picton is. They just had a great big bust of all the labor trafficking, because the wineries employ people from Mexico, and the guys come over to Mexico, do all the grapes and everything like that, but then they were employing a lot of their wives, and the wives were bringing the kids. Now the wives were doing some housework in some of these mansions in the county, but then other things happened inside the households with some of the husbands, and it just rolled out and it snowballed and snowballed, and now it's called labor trafficking, and now they're going through sex trafficking with some of the wives that came over from Mexico also. So the types of trafficking, like I said, is a sex trafficking that involves the recruitment, harboring, transferring, provision, of obtaining a person for the purpose of commercial sex, often through force, coercion, fraud. Victims can be adults or minors, and one of the most prevailing forms of trafficking globally. A criminal network lures young women from rural areas and promises them elite jobs in the cities upon arrival. That's what was happening with the labor trafficking and then going into sex trafficking. They're usually forced into prostitution, and they cannot leave because of the documents, or they're confiscated. And what happened is, one of the gentlemen went into the town of Trenton and started doing some shopping, and didn't have, he was sought out that he was shoplifting, and he wasn't shoplifting, but he had no documentation on him. So when the police came up to him and said, "Where's your documentation, or where's your license, or where's your papers?" he had to explain to the officer that the farmer had kept all of his documents. Well, you should have your own documents and who you are, your paperwork. We all carry a driver's license with us, and documentation of where we live. If they keep their documents under lock and key, that could be coerced as labor trafficking. So the victims trafficked across the borders and forced preparations in commercial sex industries, often under threats or violence. And like I said, the labor trafficking as the example that I just gave. Now the organ removal, this is a form of individuals are trafficked for the purpose of removing and selling of organs. It's less common in sex and labor trafficking, but is considered very severe, violent of human rights and addressed under international law. For example, vulnerabilities, individuals are decepted into traveling abroad for medical treatment. We see this a lot when it comes down from our Inuit community down in Ottawa, when they come down for health services. Sometimes they are getting operations to sell their organs once they get to Ottawa. Victims are kidnapped or coerced underneath the organ harvesting operations, often in the regions with very weak law enforcement. Like up in Nunavut, there's not so much law enforcement out there, and they can't keep track of who's coming down off of from the Iqaluit down to Ottawa. So sometimes how traffickers recruit individuals is a variety of tactics to recruit victims. They're often exploited vulnerabilities such as poverty, lack of education, and social isolation. Common methods include false promises of employment or education. We see that a lot with the schools in Ottawa, where the kids are coming over from China or another country, where they're thinking that they're getting an education, they're going to live in the house, and they can have a job. When they get here, they're not going to school, and they're not getting the education, or they're not having the job. False promises of employment or education, like I said, fake job opportunities or scholarships lure individuals in exploitation conditions. Now when it comes to sex trafficking, the romantic relationship and groomings, traffickers pose as romantic partners, building trust before coercion victims. Abduction and physical force, victims are kidnapped outright, especially in regions where the weak law enforcement are. Online recruiting and social media and messaging platforms are to target vulnerable individuals. There is a book that I'll share. It's free online if you go to, I can pass it around. It's free online if you go to the site, and they have different, what's it called? Sorry, free podcast for this book, and the author of this book that does all the internet and has free parents podcasts that you can listen to about the internet exposure of human trafficking and sex trafficking. No, I don't. The stats for Canada. No, this is the next video I'm going to show you about ARC. Where I am, I'm certified through, but it is a U.S. one, but this is what they're trying to come into Canada, and they asked for the Niagara region to have a certificate, but they said that the Canadian Institution for Human Trafficking wasn't a buy-in this year, so they're trying to come in next year. We are trying to have all the law enforcement to have the certification. I just wanted to show you that here in Canada, they can have the NGOs that they do. When I dissected what an NGO was, I said, we don't have NGOs in Canada. And they said, if you have community partners that coincide with the police, a community can get together and form a group of people, a group of safety people that can tackle human trafficking and the supports inside the community. That's what an NGO in the States is. So in Stats Canada, for the stats here in Canada, I always try to explain that we will never have true Canadian stats on murdered and missing Indigenous women, human trafficking, because it goes unreported a lot by our communities because of the lack of trust. Every day, OPS in Ottawa puts in if there's 1 or 2 people missing in the city, but in Danny and Overbrook, right now I know that there's 4 girls missing, or they're not even in the stats for OPS right now in Ottawa. So because we don't share things with the police a whole lot, that's where there's no common denominator for true stats. So this will be a video at the very, very end of the whole presentation. So who are the traffickers? Often the traffickers are victims, share the same nationality, cultural background, and victim. They're pimps and traffickers hard to try to get the victim to appear as they're running away from home. Traffickers are experts at making promises aimed by expressing the needs of their targets to impose control. Traffickers are a large part of criminal activity, but keep in mind when poverty sets in, so does deception of exploitation and under economical stress. Keeping in mind that the traffickers can be perpetrated through the family members, friends, close acquaintances, and part of the confusing cycle of violence. So people ask me all the time, what keeps a victim inside the life of trafficking? And it's fear due to threats of abuse, sexual abuse, sexual assault and violence from family and friends, making an example of another, they create criminal prosecution or blackmail, dependency for money and identification, only sorts of housing, food, posing as a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and the concealed relationship of induced love and guilt causing pregnancy, chemical dependency, isolation, support networks, and service providers. Or the psychological factor is not always, people always think that they can't go back to a normal life because they chose to do this. Coercing threats of serious harm or physical restraints. The individuals of others care about the psychological and emotional manipulation. Like we talked about stats, in 2023, there was 570 human trafficking incidents reported to police, and a slight decrease from 2022 from 597. There was also a decrease again from the population of 100,000 population compared to 1.5 in 2022. Official stats, while important, provide only a partial picture of human trafficking in Canada. Due to its hidden and underreported nature, identifying incidents of human trafficking depend on the part of the police resources and expertise, as well as the victims' ability to recognize and report their experiencing in trafficking. Stats again, we have to get the true stats because there's so many stats that go under the rug, right? Because of our history of human trafficking and how much it's happened in our history. We have to remember that when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came together and was talking about all the stories about what happened at the residential schools, we have to understand that some of the boys and some of the girls that went to residential schools, they were trafficking themselves through the residential school system itself. We've had a lot of elders come and talked with us in Ottawa that when they were in the residential schools, they got trafficked to other residential schools because of their sexual activity, and if they were really good at what they were doing, they got trafficked to another residential school. So the boys didn't have the choice to have their first sexual experience with a man or a woman. It was kind of forced. And that's sex trafficking, that's sexual coerce, right? And neither did the women. They didn't have their first time with a male or a female. They were forced into their first sexual experience. And if they were really good, they were trafficked to other, churches and other residential schools. But some people say that we can't talk about all that history because it's too much for the common folk to think about residential schools that was sex trafficking at the same time as residential schools, but it happened. So when we have about true stats, in history, it's been happening for so many years to our people that we'll never have the true stats. But people don't want me to talk about that because of the fact that to some people, sex trafficking and human trafficking is only experienced in the last 5 years of our world. But you can't get true stats if something has been covered up and swept underneath the rug or lied about or concealed in silence and just plainly kept a secret for decades. The Indigenous stats, the real stats of Indigenous human and sex trafficking from our people is too much for the outsiders, and it's too truth, and it's too raw and too real. The Western world wants me to be silent about this and wants me to lower it down because the truth is too much for society to take in. I can't talk about human trafficking and sex trafficking that happened at the same time as residential schools, or how long that Native women and men have been trafficked over the years, then afterward just murdered and missing and then thrown away like garbage. It's too much for the general population to understand, and our stats, community stats, the true stats, have been in place in open sight for centuries, and authorities do nothing or add gas to the fire when they're helping with the MNIP or the HTUS to cover it up. And trust doesn't happen in a blink of an eye with our people. So daily, like I said, I get a number every day that what's happening in Ottawa for if there's children from the CIS missing or from the community of the Indigenous community in Ottawa missing. And it always varies and it always differs every single day. So some of the prevention strategies is education and awareness. The community education conducts awareness campaigns in vulnerable communities about the risks and signs of trafficking. School programs integrating trafficking prevention into school curriculum to teach children about safe online safety. Now, online sex trafficking and human trafficking, that's a whole other part of trafficking that we can spend half a night talking about. And there are expertise that talk about online trafficking and buying of the skins for the gaming and all that. I don't get into the online PowerPoint or online information because that's not my expertise ability, because there's other people that can talk about the online one. But again, telephones, talking, texting, gaming, there's all strategies of people luring young people into meeting up, sending pictures, and I don't get into that because of the fact that, again, we could spend all day talking about that information. So strengthening the laws and enforcement, strict legislation enforce strong anti-trafficking laws with severe penalties for trafficking, training community members, so schools, laws enforcement, police, border security, law security, social workers and skills to identify the response of the trafficking cases, and economic empowerment, job creation, provides legit employment opportunities to reduce vulnerability, causing poverty. And having nights like tonight, keeping awareness of the sex trafficking and the human trafficking that's been happening in our communities. It's going to be ARC. This is what we can do for communities. If you want to put someone together or a group of people together to help the community do an NGO, but it is really putting a unified community partnership together. I talked to the students this afternoon about if there are safe teachers here, that they could put a group together to make sure that if they see something, say something out in the community. But this is ARC, and they can come and train people in the community if they want to be certified to put a group of people together to keep the community safe.
As wonderful as the world is, as wonderful as everything that God has given us on this planet, there exists a very dark side. It's where missing and exploited American children end up. Sexually abused, child pornography, satanic cults, sacrifices, murder, and the list goes on and on and on. These are our children. These are American children. Every child deserves to grow up in a safe environment. Our office is inundated with hundreds of cases of missing and exploited children. A child does not come home until there are boots on the ground like ARC that pull that child from the evil and bring them home. I'm Basil Vaz, founder of the Association for the Recovery of Children, a 501c3 nonprofit organization of former law enforcement, intelligence, and military personnel. We're dedicated to the safe recovery of missing and exploited American children. Thus far, we have a 100% success rate in that every child we've gone after, we've brought home. We're an NGO that's been around since 1993, fundraising operation by operation, and oftentimes pulling the money from our own pockets. No one on our staff receives a salary. Our logistics are minimal, and we absolutely do not charge the custodial guardians a single penny, nor have we, nor will we ever. At ARC, we have a message for those who would exploit American children. If you touch or harm an American child, we will find you, and there is absolutely no place you can hide. Often you'll hear people say that when a child is very young, an abduction really isn't a big thing in their life, and that they don't grow up and remember those things. Let me tell you the story of Lily Snyder, who we rescued from Costa Rica. She was abducted when she was 3, and she was 5 years old when we found her in the jungles of Costa Rica. When we apprehended the kidnappers, and one of my operators, George Saganic, picked her up, he said, "Lily, your mother sent us. She loves you very much." And little Lily Snyder looked at us and said, "I knew you would find me." I'm convinced that every child, no matter how old they are, remembers exactly what happens to them in a most terrible fashion as they grow up to be adults. So I want you to think about something. If you or I were a child and we had been abducted or exploited, wouldn't you want to know that someone in America was going to come and save your life? You are that hope. Without your help, none of this can be done. Every single penny that is donated to the Association for the Recovery of Children goes strictly to operations. We have access to 150 operators worldwide to help us find missing, abducted, and exploited American children. We do what we say we're going to do. There is an unprecedented evil in the world today that is out to destroy our children. It is the sexual exploitation and enslavement of American children. If we allow our children to be captive and grow up in a dysfunctional environment, they will grow up to be dysfunctional adults. If you care about the future of America, then you need to care about the future of our children. So I'm asking you to help us rescue more children. I'm asking you to dig into your pockets, support the mission.
I know that he's talking about America, but I haven't experienced anybody or any NGO that's doing this kind of training in Canada. And that's why I was hoping that they would come to Canada to certify us, but we didn't have the buy-in. Canada didn't have the buy-in. But sitting in the classroom, in 5 days, we slept 2 hours a night because we were going through stings and operations and tactical training to rescue children. They were talking about Brockville. They were talking about the St. Lawrence County. They were talking about Thunder Bay, because all around there's borders. So I know that he talks about the US, but I haven't found anyone that will train a community besides the authorities that we have to work really, really close with to help understand how we can keep our community safe from human trafficking and sex trafficking. So that's why I know I show that it's about the US, but we do have borders and we don't believe in borders, but there's no other training in Canada like what I experienced with ARC. So now, a group of young people in Ottawa, because like I said, I come from Ottawa, they're getting together to get trained and to do that community support. So when someone is missing or murdered or missing or having human trafficking or sex trafficking, we don't have the same capacity in Ottawa that we can now that the community is coming together to get trained and to do this work with the authorities in our city. So I just wanted to share that with you because they'll come and talk to us in any area, plus they'll give us helpful hints and help us do the work with the authorities at our side to protect children from being human trafficked or sex trafficking. Now this one, thank you for doing that. The helpful hints, if you have anybody that's being out there and being sex trafficked or human trafficked, I always say yell, scream, spit, leave some DNA where you are. If you're being trafficked, some of the red flags right now in Ottawa that the Uber drivers are picking up kids and dropping them off in different places. The Facebook marketplace is selling 10 karat gold and 18 karat gold, but it's not 18 karat gold or 10 karat gold, it's actually children. So they're getting nabbed for trafficking through marketplace on Facebook. And again, watch the Uber drivers because they're picking kids up and traffic them to other different locations in the city or in different communities. Again, call 911. There's a national hotline for the National Human Trafficking Network. Sorry, it was at the end of the trailer, sorry. So in closing, truth and reconciliation is not a symbol, it's not a statement, it's an action, it's a fulfilling commitment, and respecting treaties. It's addressing the historical and ongoing impacts that shape our present and our future. The question is, are we ready to move the words to action, because reconciliation is the destination? It's a responsibility that we can move forward and carry forward together. Some of the, we talked about this afternoon with some of the young people, is that fentanyl is a big problem in Ottawa. We do have a purple one, a pink one, and there's a new one called Death. It's a gray color. But the groomers have really stepped up their game and put a liquid fentanyl for purchase in Visine bottles. And when there was one person that we interviewed that was doing this disgusting epidemic of fentanyl, they were explaining to us that when the groomers were trying to get the people in the bar system, some of the young ladies that, you know how our girls go together and they go to a bar and there's one person that's a D&D, well, they drink water at the bar. So now, if they put the fentanyl in the water bottles, you can't see if it's being tampered with. So now the D&D girls are even a hot topic for groomers, because they can't even drink water at the bar to make sure that their girlfriends are safe to get home with. So the pink and the purple, you can tell if they've been mixed with anything or another drug. But now this one is liquefied and it can go in water bottles and be actually clear. So that's a safety net. There's also a solution in Ottawa that has come up, and the only way I can explain how small it is or how fine it is, it's like the old garbage can candies, or the candy necklaces that we used to eat. There was always this white residue that came off if you had black pants on, and it would drive people crazy. Well, that small residue is called the rock, and if that residue is on a wallet or a bag or a purse, and sometimes the groomers will like drop things around the cars of the malls to make sure that somebody will pick it up. And if they pick it up, that residue is on that parcel, and it can numb you out from your neck down, and it's called the rock. So be careful when you see things around your tires or around your door handles, if there's money inside your windshield wipers. Also, there's been zip ties on door handles where groomers are watching those cars leave the malls and following those people with the zip ties on the door handles. So don't touch them, because they have that solution on them. Is there any questions? You guys are really, really quiet.
I had a question about the, it was on the tips page. Mm-hmm. It was the call 55. What's this?
Means human trafficking. You're doing a spin of call 55. Just like there's a sign on Facebook, I know that some people see the sign for a human trafficking when a girl's walking with a guy, they can do the hand movement. That's the same as the call 55. Oh, okay. Yeah, there is. The hand gesture, yeah, the hand gesture, yeah. We've seen that on TikTok too. Big thing is right now, extra large pizzas, small pizzas. Again, it's all the food delivery people in Ottawa or in the cities. It's not just Ottawa, but I'm picking on Ottawa because that's where I resign. But there's code words for everything. I didn't think that when 10 karat gold and 18 karat gold and 10 karat gold meant people, but now we figured out that some of them are having code words, just like the 55, like we're going to get an 18-year-old. And I'm not being disrespectful, but we have a big problem in OACAS right now, and in Ottawa. Ottawa kind of exploded with us, and there's no disrespect to any ethnicity, but there's a race of people that are buying up our girls and boys in Ottawa and now have leaked into Cornwall and Akwesasne. And it's the East Indian community. They love us. Point blank, they love us. A lot of our girls in Ottawa are changing their religion to their religion, or being forced to change to their religion, where they're dressing up in their regalia and their East Indian regalia, even having the dot on their head to get over the border, or to be married. This group of people that we're dealing with in Ottawa, they're so bold in the city that if a man is trying to buy a bunch of girls up, or guys, they just come and they'll ask about the swatches. Like, I need 2 girls this colored, 3 girls this colored, 4 girls this color, or boys. They don't even have any morale when it comes to buying up what they need. And we didn't think it was going to leak over to Cornwall, but after we've had our powwow in the Cornwall area, after the powwow, we've seen these swatches come out where, the only way I can think about it is like in Vegas, when you go to Vegas and if you're going to look for a pot, they go like this with the card right down on the strip. Well, that's basically what they're doing now. And in Cornwall, a lot of the girls are getting introduced to parties, or introduced to this ethnic group that are buying up our girls. And they're so bold, they don't even have any holdings on what color they are. So that's the problem that we're having right now. And I hate pinpointing it to one ethnicity, but it's a problem when there's there's a large number of people that's going through it. And also, we were talking with the border security in Akwesasne, because a lot of people are coming off from Cornwall right over the border, and we're asking the police to stop them and ask them where they're going and what they're doing, because they have no business being on some of the parts of the territory. So right now, that's what we're tackling in Ottawa and in Cornwall, and we'll see what happens with the results of that. So the online component of sex trafficking and human trafficking is, again, in the game system. Every game system has a chat room. We didn't think that all gaming systems had chat rooms, but every game system has a chat room. And the skins and the icons, again, mean something that we would say it's like an apple, but an apple could mean something else to a person that is gaming. The story that I have about a young person up in Thunder Bay, he was 7 years old, and he was gaming with his friend from Winnipeg, and he was buying skins at $30 a pop. And when he was buying, he was luring this little guy in because these skins were so expensive, and skins are like adding a coat on or adding boots on to your game person. So this is, I'm giving this very small story because this is my first gaming human trafficking experience. So when this little guy was telling me about the skins that he was purchasing, it was because they were $30 or $40, and he thought that his friend was rich. But his friend was saying that he was only 13 years old, but he cut grass and he shoveled snow to make this extra money. So this little peanut, he was 7, he had this conversation with his friend for almost a year, but in the meantime, he was explaining to his friend that his family went down to Dryden, Ontario for Christmas and would stay at the motel, and their family would go to the Walmart to get Christmas gifts. So it took a whole year for him to have this conversation with this little guy. And by the next Christmas, when the family was going to Dryden, going to stay at the motel, and he knew what his family was going to do, after purchasing different skins with him, texting pictures of his face, there was no sexing, like no sexing pictures or anything like that. There was nothing about body parts, just the face. That's why it was such a minute case of human trafficking. By the time that the next Christmas rolled around, in a normal conversation online, saying, my family's going to Dryden, were going to the Walmart. It's like a big vacation for people up in the north to go to Dryden for their shopping experience. By the time they got to Dryden, this person from Winnipeg was already in Dryden, waited till the family went to Walmart, knew the picture of the kid because they had texted each other for a whole year, and then took them back to Winnipeg. And that was a very small, minute case of, there was no sexting, there was no pictures of body parts, but just his face. And he was a 40-year-old man. So now it's ramped up to a whole other level for gaming and skins and pictures. But again, they allure them in by asking them to share pictures and find out where they are. Plus their IP address can be lured in to a computer system to find out where you live. And that's another technique that they use for online and luring. Is that what you asked? So that story was just a small, minute story because there was no sexting, but it took a whole year until the next Christmas when he lured them in to go to the Walmart to know where he was with his family. Is there any questions? Other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
I guess we're here because, this one was for adults, sorry.
Just because this presentation was meant for parents, caregivers, teachers, concerned family members, and community members. What do they do? What do people do if they suspect or if there's questions, what's the best way to be able to handle a situation like that, given okay, now I'm suspecting that, I don't know, something's going on or this conversation seems kind of, off color. What does someone do? Because I know, I've talked to Isabel a bit, and like I said earlier, people think it's not happening in Kahnawake, but there are situations where the police have to be involved and things like that. So maybe you can share a little bit about what are some of the steps that a community member can take, or a teacher, or a trusted adult.
Well, it's to call the authorities right away because they're going to be able to help you. But we had one case where there was an Uber driver here that was picking up a child or picking up a girl from the bar, and they didn't drop her off at her house. They just dropped her off at the park here. And if you're in a car and you're in an Uber driver and the driver doesn't stop at the location where you're at, please put your phone on. Keep your phone on in the car so that you can hear what's going on, and call 911. Support systems in the city. I don't know, is there an HT liaison here in Kahnawake itself?
Human trafficking liaison.
So one of the supports is maybe hiring a liaison officer to have that supports for, I don't know, for after hours, to help people with support systems for human trafficking. We don't have that here. Call 911, call a friend, go in groups of people, don't go anywhere by yourself. We have networking from all down the 401, from Six Nations right to Tyendinaga, right to Akwesasne, with liaison officers or safe houses, so that if somebody is trafficked, we have safe places to put them. If we don't have, that's why I do the ARC video, is because if the high school, I know that the high school are tackling getting groups together so that their community is safe at night. If they're going out to do a Halloween walk or Christmas caroling or something, they'll have their own group of people that keep the community safe. But having human trafficking liaison officers or workers that work nighttime, because the nighttime is most prominent time, is not the daytime. Like in Ottawa, we have so many people working 8:30 to 4:30 Monday to Friday, but at night is when everything opens up, and it's more busier than it is during the daytime hours. So call 911, ask an officer to help you. I know that is there an HT department here in Kahnawake? So that's where the authorities have to maybe get together and have their own unit. I know that we have one in Ottawa, and we have one officer in Tyendinaga and one in Belleville. But that's where I would start, was with the policing having their own unit, or somebody that is tackling this epidemic, or having Do we have school police officers? We have security in the office, and are they trained on human trafficking too? So that's the powers from within the services that I can't navigate or tell you what to do, but our schools have, every school board, and well, we have 2 school boards in Ottawa, they have 2 human trafficking liaisons for the daytime. But again, we're tackling a nighttime service that's in Ottawa because our night, like I said, our nightlife is busier than our daytime life. And everybody's open and for services and support during the day, but they're lacking at night. So that's where I would start in the community, is having a department or a liaison officer working in one of the services that can be educated, be trained on human trafficking to keep that ball rolling for the community to have that support service.
7 schools on the island of Montreal, they have what they call a social hub. Police officer that works in the school as a liaison between the school and
We have those too. That's what we have in Ottawa. Now, the Indigenous part of both school boards were against that, and they took it away for a couple of years because they thought it was too much for having an officer or someone of the law inside the schools, but we took it away for 3 or 4 years, and they brought it back because of the trafficking being so high rate at the schools. We had a small public school that's down by the market in Ottawa, and that principal really took action with the police department of Ottawa because the groomers were coming right to the fence and offering juice boxes and cheese strings to the poor kids that were sitting by the fence, and then taking them after school. She put up a wall. It's a great big gate now in front of that school, and she got ridiculed for putting up this, we call it the wall, but she's like, I have to protect these kids while they're here. And I can't have somebody at the doorstep all the time to help us. So now that school's really bombarded in, but there's no more groomers outside their doors either. So we brought them back. Now they're called the school security. They're not officers, but they're linked to being liaison officers with OPS. Malls, movie theaters. I never thought I'd go to a dog park. Last year I was asked to go to the dog park in Ottawa, and this is when we found out about the fentanyl being in the liquid form, because when we interviewed groomers, when they get charged, they're like, they want those little librarian looking girls, you know, the ones that go to the library and go to the walk park or the dog park with their dogs. And that's why they told us about the fentanyl being liquid form. So the dog parks, the movie theaters, the skate parks, the parks itself, public pools, malls, nail salons. Is that what they have here? That gentleman said this afternoon was salons? There's nail salons here? Ours are the malls. Our malls are just jam-packed full of kids. Sports teams we're tackling. Our university and our colleges. This is where we're having a really bad problem at Algonquin College with this ethnic group. Because there's an ethnic group that goes to school at night, and then they're bringing this is where some of the dilemma is, because they're bringing our girls are being in the Indigenous Studies department, and they're always being there at night. They're like, what are you doing here at night? But they're hanging out with these other ethnic groups at night. And I mean no disrespect to any ethnic group, but that's where we're seeing a problem. I guess in Kanyen'keha, when I drove around while we were on the break to understand the geographics, is that I would have someone that was patrolling, especially this major highway, but that's me and my magic wand brain. I'll talk about Tyendinaga so I don't be disrespectful to Kanyen'keha. In Tyendinaga, we have 2 dudes that constantly go up and down where our smoke stops are and our pot shops are. I'm just speaking the truth. Because we've had 3 girls being murdered down there, and they've had enough of it. So now there's 2 community members that have stepped up and said, we're going to protect the community as ourselves. So now they do the patrol of Highway 2 and Deserano. All night and all day. So if anything is abnormal, like if on our territory, some people will get up in the middle of the night and run to the store. That's when we had 2 girls missing because they were gone to the store at night. So now the community's come together and said, listen, we're going to protect our community, and now there's 2 patrol people from the community doing it. Is there any other questions? Well, I'll stop there.